Hey everybody, welcome to another awesome Redshift tutorial. I'm Liam Clisham, and today I'm going to talk to you about 3 different things in Redshift. And those 3 things are the material shader, subsurface scattering, and the car paint shader. Because it's so much to cover, I'm doing 3 different videos. This first one, as I said, is going to be just a general overview. The second one is going to be for subsurface scattering, and the third one will cover the paint shader on a pretty awesome car model. Before we get started, you've probably noticed too, especially if you've been following along, that this is back to a 16:9 ratio. I've heard you guys in the comments, I've talked to the Brograph guys, and we've decided just to go back to normal 16:9 1080 ratio. However, I have ordered a 4K monitor, so hopefully, as condensed as this video is probably going to look with Cinema 4D on screen, next time the monitor should be here, and so that way we get a lot more real estate. I can record in 4K for you guys, and as the web grows and the videos grow, we've got super high resolution for you guys going forward, and nobody's eyes hurt. It all looks great. All right, with all that covered, thanks so much for joining me, and let's jump into Redshift. All right, so now that we're inside Cinema 4D, let's go ahead and take a look at the general Redshift material. So I've got one set up down here, and I've got my guy set up. And if we open this up here, bring up the material editor, we'll take a look at these settings here. So under output, you're going to see basic and node material ID. So if you're going to render out AOVs, this is where you can set a material ID. So you can go 1 all the way up to whatever number you want. And that you can control in your render settings and AOV options, which I'm not going to go over today. That's for another video, but this is where you would control things like that. Under basic, this pertains to the shader graph. So right here it says output. If we go into the shader graph, you will see that this right here is called output, and this looks very similar, and we can rename it here to just we'll call this plastic output. And so that gets updated right here. But that doesn't actually rename your material. That's just for the graph editor. So if you want to rename your material, it's just like a normal Cinema 4D material. You can rename it right here, or you can rename it down in this area. So we'll just call this plastic body. And to get going, I'm going to throw this right here. And we'll make another one. We'll call this plastic package, and we'll throw it on the package. So for the body, let's go ahead and make this some kind of unique color. So down here under your base properties is where you're going to handle most of your settings outside of doing anything fancy inside the shader graph. I'm not going to go into the shader graph right now. I'm going to do a advanced material too. This is really supposed to be a series to show you the 3 main editors, or not editors, 3 main materials and how to edit them, just using the basic Uber shader, and then adding in things like textures and merging layers, blending materials together, things like that. I will do in an advanced follow-up. This is just so anyone opening up Redshift for the first few times can start to get their beak wet and understand how this is broken down. So under here we have diffuse, backlighting, translucency, as I slur that because of my cold, reflectance, refraction and transmission, and some subsurface stuff, which I'm not going to get into today. I will get into that in the next video, which will go over subsurface scattering. Same with multi-subsurface scattering. Those two I'm just gonna leave off because there's a lot to cover with that. So for right now, these basic ones where we can start diving in and setting our colors and reflection and things like that. So first off, to set our normal diffuse, right now he's gray. You can go in and choose a color by clicking on it. I kind of like orange, so I'm going to choose orange. And before I continue, if you ever want to use a preset, they're all right here, and there's plenty of them. So there's glass, tinted glass, water, plastic. if it opens up and it says custom, it's actually set to plastic. It's the exact same settings. So that's the baseline that you can think of this at. So if it kind of looks like physical renderer or standard renderer, that's because it's using this plastic as its baseline, and it's pretty close to what a Cinema 4D material looks like, just stock without any modification. So you can see down here, we've got our guy looking nice and plasticky. I'm going to turn up my dome light right now. Probably like a 2 will be good. Yeah, now we can start to see the plastic and highlights and specular and things like that. All right. You know what? I'm going to dock this here so I don't have to keep blocking our IPR window. So what weight is going to do is what you think. It's going to add or subtract the intensity of the diffuse. So if we bring this back, you'll see this starts to get darker and fully off. Now if we go all the way back up, we get our color back, and you can mess around and find some place in between if you need to. And what roughness does is at 0, it makes it seem like everything's perfectly smooth and polished. But if we crank it up a little bit, so say like 0.5, starts to kind of get like a 3D printer look to it. Hasn't been fully refined. It's got a little bit of grit to it. If you go all the way up to 1, it really starts to spread the diffuse all the way around the object. So right now it's pretty dulled out in certain areas. It doesn't have that same vibrance and saturation that it had. I kind of like leaving it with just like a little bit of roughness, so like 0.05 is good, just a little bit. Nothing's going to be completely smooth. Even things that are mechanically polished aren't going to be completely smooth. So this just gives it that little bit of finesse of imperfection. So next up for backlighting and translucency, it's kind of like the poor man's subsurface scattering. And what I mean by that is if I start to change the color to say something, let's say probably, let's do blue. Crank that up a bit. And if I bring this up to, we'll say 0.75, you'll start to notice that he gets a little bit transparent, but not all the way. You can still see the orange in there. If I bring this down to -2, there's just enough power to light him up. And I turn on this area light that I've set up here. You can see that starts to have like this subsurface scattering translucent effect going on. And something that I really like is you can kind of get like a gummy bear look going. So if I bring this down, and I'll just turn it all the way off to really show this. You can see we've got this kind of plastic subsurface scattering gummy bear look going on, and this kind of cool transparency going on there. And you know what? I don't really like him having this gray, so let's make him fancy. Some fancy pink purple underwear. So what you can do is kind of save some energy and some render times if you want to have a subsurface scattered look, but either don't have the equipment or can't get to a render farm like Pixel Plow, things like that. This is really kind of meant to mimic that a bit. And it's not perfect, but it's a good start. So if we crank that all the way up, and I'll turn off this area light and bring in a point light. Bring this in here, put it in the middle, maybe like an Iron Man area. You can see just a little bit coming through right there. But if I crank this up, you get this really cool glow going on. And turn it to the side a bit, bring this forward, maybe bring it up even more right in here. Maybe I can even get it right in this area, right in like the jaw area. Yeah, there we go. You get some cool effects going on. So this kind of looks like an old McDonald's toy that you would get in a Happy Meal, where you squeeze its legs and then the toy lights up from the inside, or something like that, or like a Transformers type deal from McDonald's. At least that's what it reminds me of. Kind of reminds me of a gummy bear, as I said already. And you can crank this up even more, really get some cool glow effects going on. But like I said, it's really just like a poor man's subsurface scattering. So if you've only got one GPU card, or like I said, you're on a really tight timeline and you want subsurface scattering, but you just can't implement it, this is how you can go about doing that. And if you go to Redshift's website, you can totally read about all this, and it's really written in a digestible way. So if you want to learn more about what I'm talking about in greater detail and the math behind it and the science behind it and how they implement these things, their website is fantastic for that. So why don't I go ahead and crank this back up, and you can start to see it added back into here. And now it's starting to merge together and make this green color, because we know yellow and blue makes green, even though this is kind of orange and blue. And I'll roll that back. And you'll see just how fast it is too. And we'll kill that point light, and we'll bring the dome light back up to 2. Got some nice lighting going on him. And so we can start going through some of the other options. So down here in reflection, most of the time you're going to want your reflection to be similar to your diffuse color. But for the time being, just to talk about what reflection is, reflection controls like these specular highlights in here, or anywhere that is going to have the light reflecting off of it, or if you have caustics turned on and it's reflecting off of it and reflecting onto this and then reflecting again, that would be controlled by this. So since we're kind of orange and want a reflection to be a little bit lighter, I'll kind of do this yellow color right here, and you'll see in a second it updates right there and changes to this yellow. And just like up here, nothing's 100% perfect, so I'm going to do like a 0.125 just to give it a little bit of noise and fall off right in there. And at the moment, it's a pretty clean render. I'm doing just progressive render at the moment, but if I throw in my buckets, you'll see it's pretty clean. I don't think I need to increase my samples, but this is the first time you're seeing samples. So if you have a dirty scene and you're starting to mess with your render settings, and say you've got your samples maxed, or as max as you want them, and it's still churning away and churning away, you can come into your materials and start to finesse here, or there's global overrides inside here. So if you don't want to have to do it to every material or figure out exactly which material is causing your noise, you can start to do it in these areas here. I personally like to try and do it as I'm going along. And so if I see some noise, which there's no noise at the moment just because we have enough samples, why don't I go ahead and turn these down just for effect. So we'll go down to just 8 samples. And you can see it gets a little noisy. Running out of space just because I'm working at the 16:9 ratio. Let's see, how about we do fixed scaling. All right, so now we can start to see it's getting grainy in there all over. And if we come in to our material editor, we can bring this up to say 128. I think we're gonna have to bring it up pretty high to clean this up just because we have such low unified samples. And so you can see now in these reflection areas, these specular highlights, they start to clean up nicely. But because we were working with such a nice number before, I'm gonna just bring this down to 16, and whoop, random fluke mouse hit, so we'll say 256. I'm using a Wacom pen, and I think I'm due for a new one because it keeps bringing up my menus randomly or zooming in and out randomly. Or maybe I just need to update my drivers. So if you see random pop-ups, it's not me having weird twitchy hands. It's just my Wacom pen is starting to die. So yeah, so we've got this nice clean render going on at the moment. And this is where you can start to tweak your samples. So here comes the geeky technical stuff. BRDF. So what does that mean? Well, BRDF is bidirectional reflectance distribution function. So basically it means how light is reflected off of opaque surfaces. And opaque means, so generally non-transparent or translucent, so solid colors, things like that. So what that really means is that these are a few different types of ways. Come on, mouse. There we go, Wacom. All right, a few types of different ways that light can be scientifically calculated to reflect off of things. And there's 3 in here. First one's Beckmann, there's GGX, and I'm probably going to butcher this, but Ashkeman, there we go, Ashkeman-Shirley. So the first one is kind of the baseline for the industry, what most people are using either in Blender or in Cinema 4D or Max or Houdini and all the render engines. This is kind of like the standard baseline. The way it's calculated is it uses wavelengths, and you can look up got like how other calculations such as Phong use different types of mathematics, but for Beckmann they use wavelengths, and it's supposed to combat color shifting. For GGX, it's kind of more of a highlight specular focus calculation. Has for like these fall offs on the specular hits, they're a little bit longer, a little bit more pronounced. And then the next one, which I'm just going to call AS so I don't butcher it again, is kind of this middle ground between Beckmann and GGX. So it's starting to become more of the standard from what I've been reading. It's got a little bit better spread over dark values and calculation, and even like the specular hits are a little bit more pronounced, but they don't have as long as a fall off as GGX. So the fall off being, man, my tablet does not want to play along. There we go. The fall off being right in here, as you see, it gets lighter and falls into these darker areas. GGX would have a longer time going from light to dark, and then so either Beckmann or AS is going to be a shorter time or a little bit more well-rounded and not so harsh. So at least that's my understanding. Honestly, I don't have a 3D background. I come from a design background, so if you are watching this and you're screaming at the screen saying, man, Liam, you're an idiot and you're wrong, please leave a comment saying that I'm wrong and point me in a direction so I can learn with you guys. I did my due diligence to research this and want to make sure I'm giving you guys the right information. So I'm pretty certain I found the right information, but again, if you're screaming at the screen, leave a comment and I will update in the next video and set things correct. All right, so let's see, what do I want to go on to? I was just doing BRDF. I think I'm going to just leave it at this AS one. So anisotropic or anisotropy is the way that the specular kind of rotates around an object, or how it wraps around normals. Normals being, if I go into this view here, do full body. If I click on one of these, this is a normal on the front. So unlike in Houdini, you can't really just turn on a normal. But if you go in here and you do reverse normal, you'll see it changes colors and is backwards. So what this is going to do is tells these specular lights and highlights how to rotate around. So if I bring this up, you'll start to see these start to blend and bleed off a little bit. If I bring them up even more, you can see it really up in here. They get stretched out. And then this rotation will actually control the rotation. So you can see right here, it's kind of got this interstellar black hole loop going on now. Right in there, they're starting to like wind up into themselves. So if you want to start controlling that, and it kind of helps with metals specifically, this is a good place to go in and mess with that. It's really about stretching the reflections and how they wrap around things. I'm going to go ahead and just leave it at like 0.05 and probably set this back down to 0. So just have a little bit of stretch to them. So Fresnel type, if you're at this point in your career and you don't know what Fresnel is, you should probably pause the video and do some research, and you probably shouldn't be using a third-party renderer yet. So Fresnel is a scientist, and I forget his first name, that was really among the first to start calculating how light falls off and is measurable, and things have refractions and all of that. So for Fresnel type, this is 4 different ways, really it's 3, and one's just an advanced way of calculating the refraction of something. So everything in the world has refraction. That's what this number down here is. It's an index of refraction. It's a scientific number of measurement. So anything above 2 is like a metal, and anything between 1 and 2 is just like normal objects that you would see in the world, and everything from plastic to paper. And so the index of refraction can be measured on a piece of granite or steel or paper or aluminum or things like that, really anything. And so you can go and look up these numbers. 1.5 is for plastic. You can do like 1.51, I believe, is aluminum. Let me, I don't want to change all my settings already, but even just like a point of a difference is all it takes between like plastic and aluminum. And certain sites are going to say different things. So like some places say plastic should actually be like 1.48. 48, and it makes little differences. You may not even notice depending on how good your eye is, but it's a good baseline. And then they have this advanced one, and the advanced one is really red, green, and blue values, and you can find these online, and they get very specific. So red might be 1.476, and green might be 1.51, and blue might be whatever. And then you can change the absorption of that through these Kelvin numbers in here. I generally just look up the regular IOR, the average of it, and it works really well. So you can be really specific, especially if you're working in ArcViz, or if you're working in, say, biology and rendering out cellular animations and things like that. You might want to use this type of advanced setting here. Color and edge setting, the way Redshift describes it, is an artistic friendly version of IOR. So if you're working with non-metals, then you would leave this black, and you can just start adjusting things. So if we want like a purple reflection, we start to get purple reflections. If we want blue, we get blue. And so it's really in there if you want to have more artistic control and not worry about these numbers. But you are going to start to lose that physically based accurate rendering. And then if you are working with metals, you can start to adjust your black value here. So the more white it is, the more metallic it's going to become. And you can see here it starts to get super shiny in these areas. And then metalness is kind of a holdover from not really, I shouldn't say a holdover. It's kind of a more PBR, physically based rendering workflow mentality. So if you're working in Substance Designer, if you're working in Unreal Engine, this is where you can start plugging in some of those things. So let's go ahead and make this black. And if we bring up the metal, you'll see it becomes metallic just like that. And this is where you would probably use your shader graph and bring in a texture and plug it into your nodes here and start controlling this, especially like a glossiness or a metallic image or texture. This is where you start to pipe that in. So if I go back to IOR, I'm going to just leave it back there since we're working with plastic and I'm not using anything in the shader graph at the moment. And so we're pretty much through that. Man, it's taken 23 minutes. So I hope you guys understand now why I'm going to split this up into 3 parts. It's a lot. So refraction and transmission is working with glass. So if I crank this up, you'll start to see our guy start to be transparent here. We've still got a little bit of yellow diffuse in there. And I've got progressive rendering on, so it's going to be a little dirty, but that's okay. For this, it works fine. Again, you've got samples in here, so let's try 32. Crank that up a little bit, and we'll clean up a little bit. So things to think about in here. So link to reflection. So link to reflection is going to use the IOR from reflection and keep it the same here. However, you can set it manually. So if you want this to be like 5 and super shiny, you can do that. So your reflection will be 1 IOR, and then your refraction will be something completely different. And you can start to see we've got these cool like self-imposing warping of the glass here. I'm going to keep it linked to the reflection. And then dispersion is like, what is that, Pollyanna? It's a really old movie where like if you take a crystal and you hold it up against a light, it starts to refract the light and disperse it into this rainbow color. That's what this is going to do. So if I crank this up and if I pull back a little bit, you can start to see we're getting this rainbow refraction in here, especially like right in this area and in these areas where the light's being pulled apart and separated into RGB values. So that's where you'd control that. Thin-walled is like if you had a single pane of glass, it would just go right through it. So you can see right here, it kind of looks like a bubble a bit. But it's actually like a single pane of glass. So if you look out a window, the light's not getting bent at all. It is just going straight through. And because we've got some diffusion on it, that's why we can still see it pretty well. I like how this guy's underwear is showing up. That's nice. Got some nice cheekiness there. Yeah, it's kind of, I think this would be schmoopy underwear right there. I can see David Schmoopy Ariev wearing this and getting all buff. So that's pretty much it for general. Let me go back into the material editor here, and I can turn this down, and you'll see you can start to blend it together and have like partial refraction. Just for this to keep it nice and plastic looking, I'm going to keep that off. And subsurface is the next one down, and we're not working with that, so we can leave that alone for now. I'm going to jump over multi-surface or multi-subsurface scattering and go into coating. Sorry, I'm starting to get really sniffly. So coating is like if you bought a new car and it's got this really nice clear coat on it. This is how you would control that. So what's another good way to put it? Like a varnish on a table, or if you had like a slimy wet surface, or if you want to add in scratches and fingerprints through textures. This is all done through that, because this in the graph editor has its own bump area. Let me see if I can start to show you that. So under overall, you can see in coat, and then overall as well, there's another bump input. So if you want to have some minor details like those scratches I was saying, or fingerprints, that's where you can start to add that in the graph editor. But for this purpose, why don't we just go ahead and crank this up. You can see it starts to get pretty shiny. And if I bring that up here, it gets shiny again and a little bit spread out. And I'm going to go ahead and go to AS and go to advanced, and let's say I want purple, so we'll do 1, 0, and 1, so we get red and blue going. And because there's this orange that it's mixing into, it kind of gets green in certain areas. We can bring this back a little bit. So now we've got this like purple coat that's mixing into it, but because of the orange, it's getting like this green yellow slime vibe to it too. So that's where you'd control this. You can control how thick it is through this right here, so we'll just say like a 5. You can see in some of the darker areas it really started to build up a good bit. We can just do 0.1 where it was down at already, bring this down, and we can just have a little bit of coating on there. Transmittance is going to be kind kind of like transmittance and subsurface scattering, or if you're working in volumes. I don't know the best way to describe it to you, except that, man, come on, remote, or not remote, mouse, that it will just darken it up and kind of scatter it a bit more. It's the same kind of transmittance that you would use to control scattering in subsurface scattering, and volumes, things like that. So I'll go over that more when we get into subsurface scattering, because it has the same definitions. But you can think of it as kind of just finessing the coating a bit more. Then we can go into overall, and you can probably guess what overall means. So overall tint, if you want to add a tint to this, let's say we want an overall tint of red. We pipe that up, and he starts to turn red. And it keeps all the same calculations that we've done through these base properties, except now it's just being tinted red. Opacity, same deal. We can crank this down and start to have him disappear. And that's not the same as transparency. This is actually kind of adjusting the alpha of the guy, so he's actually disappearing. If we crank it all the way down to 0, he's gonna be gone. So all we see right there is his nice fancy underwear. Crank this back up. Emission is like lighting, so if we want him to kind of have a blue emission coming off of him, and probably should turn up my weight, you'll start to see he's got this glow to him. If we go to red, or I guess that's going to be pink, but this isn't actually going to have the same kind of effect as using an area light or an incandescent material. This is just kind of a faux emission. So if we throw a sphere or a cube in the scene, you'll see it's not actually getting lit up by this. What's actually happening, what you're seeing off here, is more of reflection than it is of anything else, especially because we have this red and purple in here. So it kind of emits, but it doesn't really. Let me see if can I crank it up to 20? I guess I can. I guess it does actually emit. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I read about that wrong. I swear I have the Redshift document open right now, and I'm looking at it. Let me bring that up, because I really thought they said it didn't affect other things in the scene. Doot 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 doot. There's my singing when I'm a little bit sick or having allergies. Let's see. Material, general, advanced. All right. So emission. What's going on with that? This is emissive color of the material. This is a multiplier of the emissive color of the material. Shows examples below. I guess it does illuminate and affect the scene. I really thought I had read that it didn't. So everyone listening, I'm sorry. I just reread it and see that I was wrong. My bad. Sorry. That's surprising to me. All right. So as you can see, it is actually lighting that up. I was wrong for a little bit. So anyway, we'll crank that back down, go back to our plastic guy, and get rid of our box. There's my pen doing a random zoom again. So we go into optimizations. I'm going to go over this again in advanced optimization, especially for talking about render settings and optimizing your scene. You can go to the Redshift website and read about this. This basically overrides your world settings in here, or your overall settings here. So if you've got everything pretty much set except for this one material, this is where you'd go in and optimize for this one material for very specific things. just not worth getting into it, especially when we're already getting close to 40 minutes of recording, right? 40 minutes, yeah, 33. So, what else? So, advanced, again, I'm going to just go over it a little bit. Here you can start to control your diffuse settings a bit. So this is how much is being seen by the camera. So right there, we just see the indirect lighting diffuse on our guy. If I crank that back up, turn this down, you'll see in here this got dark and black instead of the actual color. When I bring that up, it'll be its orange color in there. Same with reflection. If I turn that down, you'll see these areas get dark and black. Bring that up, and then the indirect ones, so like these areas here, they actually turn white because they're not having any impact on the reflection. So there we go. I shouldn't have said white, I meant black. And these areas here. Same with coding. So if our coding was really cranked up and I turned it back down, you'd see that would be doing the same thing. So you can control a lot of the details here because of how this is a biased engine. All right, so with all that covered now, the next step that I'm going to go, or the next things I'm going to go over in the next video are subsurface scattering. So I'm going to bring in a new object and some new materials to show you what subsurface scattering looks like. And I'm going to go over the two, which is skin and then general subsurface scattering. And then I'll hop back in here and start talking about how that also works in here. Once you see it isolated in the other two, it'll make more sense in this context here. And then in the final video, I'm going to go over the car paint shader, and I've got a nice car model that I've set up, and I'll show you how advanced the car paint material can get. And I've actually got a second material from Billy Chitkin, who that's pretty much all he does is car renderings, and he's got a really fantastic like Uber shader that he's built for Redshift, and it looks fantastic. I'm just going to show it to you just so you can see how advanced you can get with a Redshift shader. I'm not going to break it down because there won't be enough time, but you can see what using Graph Editor can do and how advanced you can make things look. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you stick around for part 2 and part 3. If you have any questions, reach out to me at _5 FIVE 31 on Twitter, or if you're watching this on Brograph, send an email to brograph@brograph.com and they will forward me the questions, and I will do my best to answer them either in the video or on the live stream that we do on Thursdays. So if this is your first time joining, every Thursday we do a live stream of what we've covered this week on Redshift. So last week we went over lights. The week before we did like a general overview, covered some minor volumetric things. So again, if I didn't get to something in here or I said something that confused you, stick around on Thursday evenings and jump on the Twitch or YouTube chat and ask your questions there and get an answer live, because I'm going to go over this again. I usually do it a lot faster, just an overview, and then mess around in X particles or volumes or something else that seems fun to do in Redshift, and try and make Redshift crash if possible. All right, again, thank you so much. I'm sorry for my sniffling cold, and it's kind of geeky and it's a lot to learn, but pretty soon I'm gonna start having some more fun, like goal-oriented tutorials and really seeing what we can do with Redshift and how we can tear it apart and make some kick-ass stuff. All right, guys, I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Brograph.com, an online resource for learning Cinema 4D, After Effects, and other motion graphics tools specifically catered to help you prevail as a motion graphic designer.
What's up, bros? Welcome to another Brograph motion graphics tutorial.
With tutorials, plugins, and now a podcast with tens of thousands of listeners worldwide.
Yeah, it's a great community to be part of.
We give you professional time-saving tips, industry news, interviews, shortcuts, and lessons that help keep you current in the world of motion design.
Join the HDR studio, take the render settings, pick the HDR, put in reflection, and gorgeous.
I love projects that scare me. When our art director comes to us and asks for something that I had never done before, man, it gets me pumped.
Our weekly long-form podcast will give you the latest news, help you in your file management, hardware configuration, and client relations. Learn about the latest render engines, modeling techniques, and workflow integration while staying entertained.
Real nice banana.
Ah, that's so funny. All right. I'm going to live forever.
Our Brograph Talks are a chance to see the way industry leaders from around the globe are changing the face of motion design.
Sometimes you got to make stuff that you're not going to put on your reel, and I'm not here to judge.
The podcast and talks include people like Beeple, Barton Damer, Nick Campbell, Andrew Kramer, David Ariev, Chad Ashley, Paul Babb, EJ Hassenfrost, Mitch Myers, Chris Schmidt, Jules Urbach, Cornelius Dammert, David Brodeur, Andy Needham, Caitlin Kaju, Zubair Parker, Noseman, Ryan Bean, Casey Hupke, Nick Lyons, Sage, Joey Korenman, Jeremy Cox, Rick Barrett, John Dickinson, Matthias Omatola, Patrick Goski, Brandon Clements, Steve Teeple, Tom Glimpse, Patrick Longstream, Julia Simone, Devin Coe, Al Heck, and even Deadmau5.
You get that render done. Yeah, you better frame what?
Our Brograph breakdowns go behind the projects and give you an insight on what it's like to manage and maintain your own personal business or work for a large company. Join us for live sessions, check out our useful plugins, watch time-lapse projects, interact with us, and send us email questions and topic ideas. Or just hit the Rando Render button and do an imaginative daily that'll keep you on your toes.
Take all your dreams and let's do it!
Subscribe today and get automatic updates on the latest tutorials, tricks, tips, and inspiration brought to you by industry professionals Dave Koss and Matt Milstead.
We don't care how you get here, folks. Just get here.
Subscribe now to Brograph Tutorials.
It's pretty good, I guess.